Alright, so first and foremost, if you're not going out there and getting every issue of this metal series and the tie-ins, you are missing out in life, bruh. I just want you to know that about yourself. Alright, cue the music. Oh my god, it is that good. And there's more to come, so it's not too late to jump in now. Just know that in case you were debating on picking up these issues and starting to read it. Alright, so at this point we're about 18 books overall, 18 books deep in the metal series, counting the tie-ins as well. And I want to say it's about that many, with Batman the Lost being the latest. But throughout this series, Batman has been trapped in the dark multiverse since like the 5th installment. And that's about a 13 issue gap where Batman has been stuck in the dark multiverse, and we just been seeing what's happening on the outside, with the heroes dealing with the Nightmare Batman, and also a number of origin reveals from those Nightmare Batman that stem from the dark multiverse. But at this point now, we finally get a glimpse of what he's been going through while all this has been happening. And the closest comparison that I can really give you from what we've seen so far is what we witnessed with Clark and Diana's encounter with Barbatos. And I'm gonna focus a little bit more on Clark in that instance, because we find out that Barbatos also has plans for Clark. And we'll get to that in a little bit, but the first thing I want to talk about is the foreshadowing we kind of got when we saw everything that Clark was going through at the mercy of Barbatos. And before he was saved by the Flash and Dr. Fate, Clark had experienced years in just those few moments. Years of fighting with Barbatos and losing every time. And I mean, he tried everything, man. He teamed up with the Joker, he teamed up with Lex Luthor, he worked with heroes, gods, it still didn't matter. Because in the end, every time he lost. And just to give you a perspective on time frame, by the time Diana got Clark to snap out of it, at this point the Devastator had already done substantial damage to Metropolis. And we talk a lot more about that in the Devastator video, and how that Batman was infecting people at close range with a Doomsday virus, pretty much turning everybody into a version of Doomsday so they can fight Superman. And not to focus too much on this part, I'll leave a link if you need to see that video. But what I really like about it is we get to see this quick moment of Clark wanting to save Lois and Jonathan, but Diana's like, look, we need to take care of Barbatos or none of that's gonna matter. But eventually they make their way to a hideout that Dr. Fate has put together for all the heroes, mainly so they can figure out how to stop Barbatos. And essentially it's there that they put their heads together and they figure out that the nth metal is the main key for them to defeat Barbatos and the Nightmare Batman, because it's the only tool that they've seen work effective at this point. So when they decide that, hey, we need to get our hands on every bit of nth metal that we can, because that's the only thing that's going to give them a fighting chance, they split up to go find it. And so now Superman, Flash, and Steel take a separate route, so Superman can enter the dark multiverse and get Batman. But at that moment of the hero's departure, the Nightmare Batman also show up. And everybody dips out, all with the exception of your Night Master and his Uncle Bobo. Well, not really his uncle, but still, RIP. But after everybody gets out of there, Superman's on his way to the dark multiverse, and a number of the other heroes heading out to get nth metal. But even when they get out here, there's a couple things I want to point out. And the first thing is that the Batman who laughs is not even worried about it, because really at this point things are going just as he planned, especially with Superman. And when the other Nightmare Batman show concern, the Batman who laughs is like, hey, just play me a song. Play me a song on that jukebox, B66. And there's a huge significance here with music, especially because it's only through vibrations that you're able to communicate between the light and the dark multiverse. And so now while this is happening, keep in mind in the beginning of Dark Knight's Metal issue number 3, when Clark was in this induced dream state, if you will, by Barbatos, Jonathan and Damian were playing a song for Clark, Lois, and what appeared to be Bruce, and Diana was there as well. But the significance of that song comes back in the moment where Flash and Steel help Superman to cross over to the dark multiverse, where he flies into a trap. And when he flies into this trap, he sees these towers just like the towers that have been coming up in the multiple cities in Earth Zero. And the crazy thing is, amongst all these bodies on these towers, he sees Bruce. And Bruce was just like, I was trying to warn you. Barbatos wanted you to come here because of your cells and the way they charge. You are the perfect battery. And Bruce goes on to tell him, I was trying to talk to you through the music. And it ties back to the songs that the kids were playing in Smallville, which was a 3-note song as they had mentioned before. You had the note D, you had the note C, and a bunch of na-na-na-nas. But Batman told him the D is for don't, the C is for come, and the nas, that was for here, like don't come here. Or nas and nay or no, don't come for me. So now I want to skip over to Batman's mind inside of the dark multiverse. And when we first see him here, he is a grandfather. He has lived out an entire lifetime of being Batman, he's retired, and it really seems like the ideal ending, like there's children running all throughout the house. Like at a first glance, everything's great. But what ends up happening is one of his daughters doesn't really want to play with the other kids. She wants him to tell her a story. Or better yet, his granddaughter, she just wants him to tell her a story. And not like a fictional story, she wants to hear like a real story. And so now this Bruce of an older age, he has like a wall that is full of books of different accounts of different chases, different battles. He said he had to write them all down because there's no way he could just remember all of them. And what's real crazy is the book that she chose is called The Case of the Chemical Syndicate, but it was sitting between No Justice and The Court of Owls. And that's so crazy to me because like I mentioned before, as far as readers jumping into this whole Dark Knight's Metal theme, and like I said, it's something you can jump right into and still get it, but the Court of Owls is one of a few other stories that predates the issues of Dark Knight's Metal, but it's very much connected to it. And I break down more about that in my Batman Who Laughs video, so I'm not going to dive too deep into that right here, but just see these different Easter eggs surrounding Bruce at this point is just pretty crazy. Because while he's telling his older story, we get a glimpse back to like your original first costume, purple gloves Batman. But when he tells these different stories, he notices pretty quick that what he's reading is not the correct telling of events to what actually happened as he remembered it in his past. And at a point in the story where he meets with Mr. Gordon and his face is showing through the glass window, a bird flies directly into the window. And this is very significant because it ties into the first introduction of Nth Metal, the origin of Hawkman and Hawkgirl, and also the dawn of your different faction wars with your bird versus the bat. And the war between these tribes is essentially what this bird flying into the window kind of means. And in the past, we've been given some information about the bird tribe and how it ties to Hawkman and Hawkgirl, and their origins of being stabbed by Nth Metal and after that dying and being reborn again and again. But the details about these ancient tribes has been so spread out that it's really hard to narrow it down into one consistent, concise story. But really with your first couple issues of Metal, there's been a more consistent build-up talking about these three tribes and giving an introduction to a fourth. And really it's from here that Bruce is going to skip around quite a bit, because as he tries to tell his story, his granddaughter will correct him. And at one moment in time, Bruce will say, well, right here, there was no blood. But then his granddaughter will correct him saying, no, Grandpa, there's always been blood. Once again referring to the tribes and the war between the bat and the bird. And it's at this point that we go with Bruce to the Dawn of Man, where he's met by this mysterious woman, and she's telling him that the bird tribe is evil and that Vandal Savage is part of the bat tribe. Just really a whole lot of twisted history that Bruce knows just isn't right. But on the contrary, she tells him that all of it is really just one big story. One that starts with Vandal Savage leading the Bat Tribe, but ends with Bruce using that tribe to free Barbatos, and also with him being the chosen one that Barbatos would use in the end to defeat the Bird Tribe. And each time that this happens, it's like he's been taken from one nightmare to the next. And the different nightmares are crazy, because at one point he witnesses his son Damian just slaughter like dozens of people who were happy to see this Batman who had disappeared, and they were reaching for Batman to help them out. And Damian just took them out, like every last one of them. And shortly after that, he orders for his crew to execute Batman. And this is really just one example of many. But what's happening here is Bruce travels between these different nightmares and different realities, or different tales if you will. Over a period of time, he begins to figure it out. And it really reminds me of an old rerun of Quantum Leap. The way he just jumps from one life to the next and just lands in like a random area each time. But what's going on is Barbatos is taking him through these fabricated memories, really just to wear out his mind, make him give up so he'll submit to the prophecy that Barbatos is given. And aside from these, he's gone through instances where the Joker was the mayor. Even at one point, he was in this chapel where this girl's going to be sacrificed, and he stayed behind to save her, but she ended up giving him one of the biggest clues that would be most helpful. And the clue she gave him was to let the bird through the window. So in the next nightmare memory where we see Bruce, he's with Harley Quinn in a spacecraft trying to avoid the Justice War, and she was really trying to provoke Batman like, hey, we've been fighting with constraint and it hasn't been working. But Bruce understands that each one of these memories, they're all lifetime moments that he's experienced in order for him to give in and fully become the chosen one that Barbatos wants him to be in the prophecy that he was told. But really it's at this point for the first time we see him take things into his own power, and he breaks through this memory heading back to that original story where he was speaking to Gordon by the window with the birds so he could apply the woman's advice about letting the bird in. And when he appears back here, his granddaughter is still arguing with him, like he can still hear her voice while he's here. But he decides to reinvestigate this same room where the birds keep crashing into the window, and he realizes their trajectory leads to a wall on the opposite side of the room. And he figured this out from the information that the woman gave him, and also because he realizes that the birds can be also attracted to large vibrations of metal. And that leads him to a secret passageway out of that memory. But when he gets to the end of the story, his granddaughter just flips out in a real creepy way and just turns into that little girl off The Ring or something. Like she just flips onto the ceiling. But what happens here is Barbatos realizes that Bruce has come to a point of revelation, or at least a state of consciousness to the extent of where he's seeking Barbatos to confront him face to face. Because he's played the long games with him, at least they've seemed long to him, and he's had enough of these twisted stories about his background and his beginnings, which he feels like Barbatos is trying to twist as a form of manipulation. But when he gets to the window, he sees Barbatos face to face in the form of a reflection. And yo, like what happens right here, it reminds me when Doctor Strange met the Ancient One and she just blew his mind like completely. And that is exactly what happens here. And Barbatos just pours out his whole plan from when he's seen Batman be time displaced, and how from there he saw him like as a wagon or like the perfect transport, and how Bruce was his hero that had taken on his form and made it a symbol of good. And this even calls back to the woman that was talking to Bruce at the dawn of man, telling him that the Bird Clan was the ones that were evil. Because at the end of the day, as dark and as twisted as Barbatos is, he's the hero of his own story. Like if you take any side of any battle or any war, either side is going to believe that they're the ones who's right. And Barbatos even references the Court of Owls and how he used them to shape Bruce's history. And that part is things that we know. We talked about that before. But the mind-blowing part is where Barbatos tells Bruce, "I am the Bat." And just so nobody really misses that real quick, like with everything into account, the Court of Owls, the murder of Bruce's parents, him taking on the symbol of the bat, Barbatos is saying that he is at the center of all that. It just hurts my head just thinking about it, because it's like an inception of an idea where Barbatos is pretty much telling Bruce, like, if you subtract me, you are nothing. And it's right there where it gets Doctor Strange super trippy, because Barbatos shows Bruce that there are thousands of worlds with galaxies built around them. Like there's thousands upon thousands of those, and each representing Bruce's worst nightmare. And Barbatos pretty much tells him, look, you could have been like any one of these had I wanted your life to turn out that way. And this is a huge hit for Bruce, because Barbatos is pretty much telling him that you are ultimately powerless and you're pretty much purposeless without me. I am the symbol you personify. I am everything about you. But on top of that, we also get Bruce's first look at the Nightmare Batman. And he is terrified out of his mind. And Barbatos tells him, these are the darkest ones I can find. They are all you, and they are on Earth Zero. And I'm telling you guys, like, terrified ain't even the word, man. Like, Batman is just freaked out. And ultimately he tells him, that's enough. I can't take anymore. I quit. I give up. And immediately we see him back in the memory of him and his granddaughter, starting his new story all over again. Man, this is crazy. Like, Dark Knight's Metals got my heart like bumping through my chest, man. Like, it's crazy. But one thing though, I kind of figured that Batman would be going through a similar type of instance that Superman went through, because when Superman faced him, that experience that he described, it was like a fate that was worse than death, like continually living, fighting, and dying over and over again. And after knowing that, I would only assume that Batman is going through the same, if not worse, while trapped in the dark multiverse. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. And now I do gotta say, I do believe that Batman was terrified by seeing the different Dark Knights, but I don't 100% believe that he's given up just yet. I feel like he kind of told Barbatos what he needed to hear so he can get back in the loop and trying to find another way out, because he knows he needs to find that true window to get out, and he also knows that his friends are counting on him to come through. But definitely let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I personally can't wait to see Batman face his worst fears. And even before that, if anybody's able to find the way out of that dream loop, it's Batman, because not only is he one of the most clever minds, but he's also one of the toughest. And we see even with him attached to the tower that there were moments where he could speak, and if not speak, he could just mumble some words. So he's working on it. But I got links up here for you guys to check out my other videos. Don't forget to smash that like button for your boy, and I'll catch y'all on the next one. Alright, later.